You're listening to I Communicate on Full Service Radio 830 WCRN. Once again, here's your host, Mark Altman.
Welcome back to the Mindset Go radio show. I'm your host, Mark Altman, and just to let you know, on our website, we are on the verge of launching our new website, but on our website, if you'd like to follow us, we do seminars, webinars, we have public speaking engagements and training programs. Please come to mindsetgo.com, sign up for our newsletter to find out more about upcoming events, and certainly follow us on social media. We have a very active presence on LinkedIn, and we'd love to hear from you. So please, if you like what you're hearing on this radio show, let us know, give feedback, and keep abreast of what we're doing. So as we get into our third segment, I just wanted to kind of continue briefly what we were talking about right before the break. And, you know, the final point I wanted to make about feedback is, look, we talk about the bottom line. Companies for so long talk about the bottom line. What is the revenue? What are the end results we're looking for? And, you know, what goes with that bottom line is companies start from the bottom up, and that feedback. Look, who is the first line of defense typically at a company? It's usually some kind of receptionist or some kind of admin of some kind. And they are really interacting not only with everybody in the company, but in many cases, they're interacting with most, if not all, the clients. So who really is in a better position to give pulse of what's going on with employees, clients, leaders? And I think what's interesting is when I look at feedback as a whole, it's one, again, I talked about it earlier, initiating the feedback. Once a week, can you be mindful enough as a leader to walk up to the different people at what you perceive the lower levels are of the company and simply ask them, have you noticed anything? Have you observed anything? Have you heard or seen anything that would be valuable for me to know about the company, about the employees, and about the clients? And you know, one of these expressions that I really resent is this expression, and I hear it all the time. It's called work smarter and not harder. And the reason why I resent it is because when you work smarter, you're still working harder, right? Because the implication of the phrase work smarter is that you have to do something different than you're already doing. And when salespeople or leadership hear work smarter, they're like, oh yeah, I get it. I need to be more efficient. I need to have better use of my time. But what it doesn't talk about is working smarter can be so simple, little incremental changes that don't demand huge changes, that don't demand a real transition in your habits. So as a leader, if you could do one simple thing and make sure you're reaching out, you know, ideally in person, depending on how much of your company is virtual, but if you're reaching out once a week and just walking up to people and asking those questions, it could take 10 or 15 minutes of your time a week. And I got news for everybody. Time is the enemy. We all know that, okay? But if you always use the excuse of time or frequently use the excuse of time, then nothing will ever get done. Because at some point you have to fit in things that will promote personal growth, professional growth, and development for yourself as well as your team. So I want to cover one other thing about trusting your gut. And that is charisma, persuasion, and first impressions. Okay, so many times our brain tricks us into thinking that we can trust people and trust instructions or requests because of who they're coming from. And I think there's a process that has to be taken to really know, can I trust that person? Is this, and you know what's an interesting tidbit about this is, if I was to sit down and tell people we were going to be doing persuasion training, and I've done this, I've tested this out, people get very triggered. Persuasion feels manipulative. But then if I change it to influence, people don't mind as much. It doesn't feel as salesy or manipulative. And so this concept of manipulating people and getting people to trust you, it is such a bugaboo when it comes to salespeople. And salespeople so often will do anything to describe their role differently. They won't call themselves a salesperson. They call themselves a business development person or a client services person or an account manager person because they don't want to be associated with sales because they are assumed in most cases as being manipulative and not trustworthy. You are going to burden me on my time. You are going to push me on your own agenda. And these kinds of perceptions people have really inhibit a person's ability to trust. But that's just it. Is it the title or the role that you have that's creating trust, or is it the actions and the words that you take that support that role that are really defining whether people can trust you? So I think as you're evaluating what you determine to trust other people, it's really critical that, yes, credibility is important, track record is important, but gut instinct's also important, and understanding a decision-making and critical thinking process really leads to those three components. So now, the question is, how can I really know if someone's trustworthy? If I'm standing there, if you and I are standing together, if I'm standing with your leadership team or one of the departments in your company, and we're looking at people and talking with people, and they say to me, okay, Mark, so what am I supposed to do? I get what you're saying, but now how do I know if someone's really trustworthy? Okay? Well, one of the things I think about is, does that person remind me of someone in my past? Now, that can cut both ways. But at the end of the day, when I think of trust, I think of, am I seeing signs, whether it be body language, how they react emotionally to situations, where I've had interactions with these kind of people, and the results I've seen haven't been positive. So if you can relate that person to an experience you've had in your past, it doesn't mean it's the be-all, end-all, but it's a red flag for sure. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't naturally work the opposite the same way. So if you meet someone that seems really friendly, very trustworthy, exhibiting the signs that we've talked about throughout the show today, doesn't automatically mean you can trust them, but it's a good flag, just like the other way is a red flag. The second thing is, if I follow, and I want you to pay attention to the word I'm about to use. We're talking followers versus leaders. So the ability to trust someone, you're really being a follower, right? Now, in turn, that behavior could lead to a leading behavior or leadership. But following, can I trust and follow this person? Now, remember, we talked about gut instinct. So when you make the decision to follow the person, and then after you make the decision, if you get burned and you say, why did I do that? Well, why did you do it? Did you do it because the person did have a good track record and this was a fluke? Or did you do it because you were taken by emotion and you were caught up in the moment and you weren't strong enough to advocate for yourself or be assertive to make a different choice? And that's a critical thing. Because how you respond, again, this is fundamental emotional intelligence. How you respond and react to situations, if you're second-guessing yourself, understand what that root cause is of why you're second-guessing yourself. Now, if you think about it, what would be some outward signs that you could see that you wouldn't trust this person? Well, for me, some of the obvious ones, you could see that person talking about others behind their back. You could see that person not following through on their promises and commitments. You could see that person not really making the time to value your feedback. So when you see those kinds of things, does that mean you automatically don't trust them? Well, depending on the relationship, it might be worth talking to them about this. You know, there's this expression, is it a fluke or is it a trend? When something happens one time, it could be a fluke or it could be a sign of things to come. When something happens repeatedly, it could be a trend that tells you everything you need to know, or perhaps someone's never said something to this person. And I want to just share a quick anecdote before we go into our third break, and that is, I was working 3 years ago with a sixth grader. Part of what we do at Mindset Go is we talk about building confidence and skills for high school students, primarily college students, and sometimes middle school students. So this sixth grader, I posed the question to the group, and I said, give me an example of a teacher that you don't like, not because you necessarily think they're mean or you have a personality conflict with them, but a teacher you don't like because you think they're not an effective teacher and something you could give them some constructive feedback. So this child, a great kid, but was very introverted, and not all that confident. And so we talked through an actual conversation intelligence template where he actually had a very simple format where he could go in and talk to this teacher. His complaint, to be succinct, was that the teacher, when she put notes on the board, would erase the notes too quickly before he could write them all down. And he was very frustrated. So he goes up to the teacher and he says, I forget her name. Let's say it's Mrs. Jones. Mrs. Jones, I just wanted to bring up, if it's okay, that I noticed that, you erased the notes too quickly. I mean, he was practically shaking as he retold me the story. And her response was, oh, I didn't even know that. I'll make sure I don't do that in the future. Now, in that case, he was heard and validated. My point is, very often when we lose faith and trust in people, no one's ever spoken up. They don't have the self-awareness to even realize they're doing these bad habits and trends they are. So at some point, someone has to speak up, not to guarantee results, but to hopefully create the behavior change. So it's important to remember in a trust situation, sometimes that self-awareness piece is really lacking, and you could be the one to reverse that trend by creating the self-awareness for that person. So we're going to go into our final break. This is Mark Altman for the Mindset Go Radio Show. When we come back, we'll finish our final segment on trust, and please stay with us. We'll be right back.